G'day guys, this is on the phase 3 of the Novavax. So let's just go to the actual study. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so this is the efficacy and safety of Novavax in adults in USA and Mexico. So this was basically the Novavax COVID-19 demonstrates 90% overall efficacy and 100% protection against moderate and severe disease in PREVENT-19 phase 3 trial. So that's what the, nice name for that. So pretty much the general sort of gist of it is that generally it's well over 90%. Which is good. And in terms of severe cases and stuff like that, the efficacy against variants, pretty well as well. They didn't consider variants of concern or interest. They just sort of lumped everything together. So against all variants, basically, is what they mean. Currently, even in this period, because this was done pretty much late last year in December. So that was right in the heart of Delta coming in. So it's pretty good results considering. It was right in the middle of that sort of stuff. So, and that's just a general outline that for the actual study that they actually had. And this was basically their link to the actual study itself. So this is the recent one on the 11th of October that came out and actually provides a link to the actual study itself, which is the one up there, which is basically that website. And this is the actual full study rather than just the part of it. So we can cover a few points in that regard. So I'll just first of all go down to page 10. Okay, so look at the analysis. Actually, I'll leave that for last. Let me just go for here. So participants, about 31,588 participants screened. And then they literally selected 229,949 that were randomized between the 27th of December last year and February the 18th this year. So that's pretty much the time that the Delta strain sort of was coming out of that period. So what they did was it was a 2-to-1. I don't know why they did it like that, but they just did a 2-to-1. So there were more people in the intervention group and less, and about half the people in the placebo group. That will tend to make, how can I put it, the intervention group, if there are problems, to make it look worse. So, because when you go 50-50, it's fairer for both groups. When you have one group larger than the other group, you're likely, if there are things, you're going to be more people that are going to pop up in this group. That's how they've decided to do it. So there was a balance between more or less males and females. So about 48.2% identified as males and as females, and the rest would be males, which would be about nearly 52%. So then you had whites, nearly 76%, Black / African Americans, because this was done both in Mexico and in the US. That's why they've got this black, dark-skinned people, basically, both in would be in Mexico and African Americans in the US. 6.2 as Native Americans, Alaskan Natives, including American Indians, and Native Mexicans as well. So they sort of lumped all them indigenous populations into one group, 6.2. Then we're looking at Hispanic and Latino, 21.5, and one or more comorbidity conditions were reported by 47.3%. So nearly half of them had comorbidities of one sort. So that's quite high. So I know in the Pfizer one, there was actually less people with comorbidities. There was a bit of criticism on the Pfizer one because there was quite a few younger and healthier people. So they've got about half the people here that are actually have got some underlying health condition. So that's good, because you do have tend to have nowadays nearly half the population having some issue. So that's more representative of actual population than anything else. The median age was 47, and 11.8 were over 65 or over, because there is a underline there, so equal or over. Baseline, so they did a PCR positive rates 6.3 and 6.9, and placebo recipients respectively. They did screen them because they do say they did screen people. I'll link all these things. I'm not going to go back to it. They did screen to make sure that people didn't have underlying COVID and stuff like that, active COVID. So where we go. Now, they did find here in the Hispanic and Latinos only demographic group with a low 67.3% compared to other groups, which was really interesting. All the other groups were over 95%. There may be a factor here with, darker skin, lower vitamin D. So that may be an issue, but, or compromised immune function. So I'm not, that's a really sort of, because all the other groups were in the sort of well over 95%. So that's a strange one. It's still over 60% what the FDA says, but still that is a bit of a low, I'm not sure what the confounders are. Maybe there are more people with comorbidities in that specific group, maybe, that was selected. So maybe a large proportion, they had disproportionate levels of people with comorbidities in that group. So being a bit more vulnerable in that regard. But yeah, anyway, it's interesting. Now, let's go back to the top. So we'll cover this part. So basically, that covers the general sort of stuff. There's the background. That was the earlier phase of the trial that was done in the UK and South Africa as well. And they talk a bit about the background information. That was the one that I actually talked about last time. And the numbers weren't as good for the Delta, but they've actually are much better, but for the numbers were slightly not as good. We're in the 80s, I went in the 90s in South Africa in particular. And the possibility there is that a lot of the people also had HIV. That's the other thing that they did include in this study. They actually also included populations with HIV, but not people with that had certain other conditions. So it was interesting anyway that they did. I know that that basically there was a bit of a difference in that regard. So let's just go down here for a sec with the method, just to get into a bit of details, because that's just a summary. In that right, phase 3 randomized observed blind placebo-controlled trial in 113 clinic sites in the United States and 6 in Mexico, evaluated efficacy and Safety. Participants received initial injections between, see, there are the very low numbers of the Mexican. That is only 6 clinics. The other thing is you've got to think Mexico, poorer people, very hard to get into sort of clinics and stuff like that. To be in there, they'd have a bit more in that regard, but also there'd be people that are much more sicker. So that may explain that 67% is what I'm thinking, potentially. Anyway, it's always these confounding things, very hard to say, because it's not something you're looking, because where the US type of clinical sites are more numerous, and as being more numerous, they sort of balance out some of those little differences in that regard. So you get a better result as a consequence when you've got more numbers. So that could be also confounding for a whole lot of reasons that we may not be aware of. So just keep that in mind. We did see it with some of the other trials as well. We see it generally with a lot because there are a lot of factors that can be at play. Anyway, we've covered that, the dates, which was last year, and the follow-up, which was basically happened in April of this year. So healthy adults, plus or minus 18 or over, those with stable chronic conditions also were included, including, sort of lung conditions, kidney conditions, and heart conditions, and diabetes too as well, and also people with HIV, so well-controlled HIV. That's interesting. They did that as well in South Africa as well, but they still got better numbers in South Africa, maybe because people in the US have got more money and can actually afford better drugs, better this and all that, and probably have their health generally is in a better state than somebody who's in a very poor state in the African continent. So these are all factors. You've got to keep these in mind about potential that all effects that can happen. Why in phase 2 was a bit different. The results weren't as strong as phase 3. So got to keep those things in mind. Key excluding criteria included known previous laboratory confirmed. So if somebody had the actual COVID infection or had a known immunosuppression, that means they were taking drugs because they had actually had maybe been donated some organ or in that regard. So, yep, which is within the guidelines of the FDA. So that's sort of the numbers. Now, this is a really good thing that they actually use. It's a randomized using a web-based interactive response system. Basically, nobody knew in the study what they were getting. The doctors didn't know what they were administering. The doctors didn't know when they did the follow-up who they were dealing with, and neither did the patients. So nobody actually knew anything. This was all computer-based. You got a number, you got an injection, and had no idea what was in it. You just used that number, and that was it. And there was a number, yours tagged against your name, against what the injection that they gave you. So injections were randomized, everything was randomized, and it was web-based, so which is really good. So no possibility of any other sort of thing potentially confounding or influencing the outcome, which is very important. Body language, anything, so good. 2-to-1 ratio, as I said earlier, something that, I think it should have been 50-50 in a sense. We would have seen in the placebo group more poor outcomes, and that would have actually shown bigger differences. I don't know why they did it like this. It really annoys me. It should be 1-to-1 when you're doing a randomized control, because basically you make one group look worse than the other, because the people that didn't get the placebo, which is only a third of the group, means that, you know, if you've actually got a certain amount of deaths in that, or a certain amount of poor outcomes, then it makes the other group, you know, not look as good, you know, because if you got a certain number of people that say, oh, this amount of people, but this amount of people in the other group, but it's much smaller, of a smaller pool, so it's more significant in that pool, in that group. But yeah, annoying, let's put it that way, from the way I see it. Now, the amount that was given is, so the amount of the adjunct within the 50, so within in the actual matrix, so the actual total amount of the vaccine was 50 micrograms, is the entire vaccine. The amount that was actually the adjunct, you know, that bark extract, that was 5. So it's about 10% of the total is the sort of sensitizing thing that gets the immune system running into the muscle location where the injection has actually happened. Once unblinded, so personal managed, studied vaccine logistics preparations and had no other role in trial conduct. Okay, so once it was unblinded, so the study had finished, then some of these people were used just to do some of the logistics and preparation, probably moving stuff around and stuff like that, which is fair enough. I mean, why employ more people? Novavax trial, and yep. I just quickly proofread it earlier, so really intensely gone through and read the whole lot. So that was that, and then there was a statistical analysis, and that was basically 95% confidence interval that they found. And the results, will go to the efficacy in a sec. So that was the initial, and these are the sort of numbers in general. We'll go down here to the result. So we basically had 19 cases occurred within the placebo group. And 14 cases. So that was in that initial part. And then in terms of people that contracted, there were 14 cases, and there were 63 cases in the placebo recipients. The incidence was higher first 42 days follow-up, while the incidence declined while continuing to increase in the placebo. So in the placebo, they kept on increasing. In the intervention group, they kept on, which is basically the immune system is now primed, so it can deal with it. So that makes sense in that regard. So these are the things that really, because that's the sort of the general sort of gist. You know, even if you get vaccinated, we know with coronavirus, you can still get it. You'll get infected with any virus. The difference is your immune system will respond and will clear it out of the system, and it won't cause any problems. So this is the part that's most important. All cases reported recipients were mild to in severity, and all 14 moderate to severe cases occurred in the placebo group. So basically you had only in the placebo group having people with moderate to severe. So you had zero, absolutely zero of any severe case or even moderate case in. So everybody else that had been vaccinated with Novavax got it. A few people got it, but basically, and that was basically 14 people. And the other one was 63, which really, in real terms, because it was only a third of the people, really, if it was 50-50, those numbers would be much higher. You could add another 50%, it would be like 90, and the other group would be by like, two-thirds of that number. So there'd be much less because they were basically substantially, two-thirds. You'd come back to the 50, which basically would take about nearly 10. It would be down to 4 or 4.5, so to speak, not 14. And the other one would be about 90 if you're a 50-50. That's what I mean. That's what I don't like, because it makes it look, the reality is it would have been much smaller in terms of when you've got a 1-to-1, and that's how you should bloody do it. So I don't know why this was done like that. No idea why it was designed by the hospitals in, the people that were doing it. That's annoying because the company has to give it to these people to do it independently. So they can't be involved because, well, you've got to get clinics to do it, hospitals and all that. I'm not claiming that these clinics deliberately, pick the numbers like that, but, it just doesn't make sense why they did it like that. But anyway, it still doesn't make Novavax look bad. In terms of that, it's just annoying because I like things to be clean when things are done. So basically we had 0 cases, which is really good. And that means for the moderate to severe, 100% efficacy, because we had 0 cases in that category. That means it prevented either moderate or severe disease, which is really good. That's what we want to see. And if I'm going to take something because I'm forced to take it, be able to travel, or somebody is forced to take it to work or whatever, you want to be able to go and turn up with a little thing saying it's got 100% for moderate or severe. I've got no issue. This is just as good as Pfizer or anything else. So it basically gets that monkey off your back, which is really good, which is a nice thing to be aware. So the demographic on the subgroups, that was the thing that I spoke about earlier, which is very few clinics. They only had 6 clinics. So maybe that was a confounding sort of thing. More people with comorbidities may have been in that group. So it doesn't really have all that information because you'd have to get the real data. These are summaries of the data. Remember, there's always a problem with studies. You literally would have to go through, there'd be a mountain of data, there'd be files and files and files, reels and reels of data, and you'd have to literally go through and put them in a massive spreadsheet and go through them. It's like when Campbell did the China study, so to speak. In his book, he contradicted his own study. The stats, the blue book as it's called, which was a thick book like that with shitloads of studies. It was just all numbers. All these stats, when people went back and drilled them, looked at the numbers, they contradicted what he was saying. So he was basically fabricating stuff in his book to sell books in that regard, which that's the thing, you'd like to be able to drill into those numbers and see the sort of comorbidities in that group, details of that sort, to be able to tease out that sort of stuff, like severe comorbidities, and you'd be able to say, okay, these people had a whole lot of other things, active things all happening at the same time. That's why, their system was really buggered in order to respond effectively. So that's what I'm talking about. Vitamin D is another factor. So to get against severe and moderate, to get 100% efficacy, that's bloody good, considering most of the population around the world is pretty much vitamin D deficient. So that's not too bad in that regard. So now this is all the other stuff about, they have tenderness in the injuries in the injection site. in that regard. So that pretty much, these are very small numbers, which is good. You know, when we're looking at headaches, myalgia, fatigue, and stuff like that, malaise. So that's sort of, you know, muscle pain, general fatigue, malaise, you know, when you feel really yucky type thing, and that sort of stuff. And that lasted for about 1 or less days, which is good. You know, that is what normal vaccines do. They don't last, you don't get this long COVID symptoms like you get with the other stuff. We won't go into that. You know what I mean. But you pretty much, that is normal because you've got the immune system that responds to deal with it. It floods the system with all these cytokines and everything else. And remember, these people have got low vitamin D. So if you've got good vitamin D and a well-regulated immune system, you're not going to get this overexpression. And so, and because it's not going away replicating like the other stuff, we won't talk about that, you basically have the issue that the immune system will run into that area, deal with it, and it'll only last for 1 or 2 days. So, and that's what you want. Like a regular flu vax, usually, you know, sometimes people respond, I don't. When I had the flu vax, absolutely nothing. Other people go, oh, I don't feel that great. Well, you know why you don't feel that great? Because you've got poor vitamin D status. That's why. And your immune system just reacted a bit more than mine. Mine was a bit more level-headed and then came down once it dealt with the issue. Yours a bit overreacted, but then there was no more active stuff there. It had cleared it because it doesn't replicate. So like the, you know, like the other stuff. So it's not going to be basically, you know, being activated continuously. So let's see, no more. Now, these are important. So let's look at the other ones. There were no episodes of anaphylaxis. Really good. So 0 anaphylaxis in the intervention group. That's bloody good, because all the other vaccines had issues with anaphylaxis amongst the people. This one, 0. That's 1 for Novavax, 0 for the rest. No evidence of vaccine-associated enhanced COVID-19. Another good. So didn't in any way have a relationship of making things worse in that regard. No event that triggered precipitous pause rules. A good thing. That was that syndrome, you know me with my pronunciations. There's going to be a bit of a horrific episode. No episodes of Guillain-Barré syndrome. I'd probably absolutely chewed that up in terms of the way I described it. But anyway, that was the one that actually we saw a bit with the Johnson & Johnson. Nothing of that sort. Good. No imbalance in myocarditis, pericarditis. So in regards to, remember, people are having like inflammation of the heart. In that regard, that's the sort of stuff they're talking about. Or thrombosis, like clotting factors, 0. None of that sort of stuff were noticed. No. And the all-cause mortality balance was 0.5 and 0.5, so no difference. So pretty much the placebo group and the intervention group, which even had more people, still had the same level of deaths. So no difference whatsoever. So basically, that is just normal background death rates that happen in the population. So that's really, really good in that regard. Anyway, there, and that's just a general discussion in that regard. So if people just want to go to the page 3, they can get the full type of summary that goes down there and the general conclusions in that regard for the general efficacy and stuff like that, that they may want for, you know, 90%, over 90% for the prevention of COVID, with most cases due to variant strains. So pretty much everything covering. So basically, you know, as far as the actual phase 3 trial, that is the final one, that quite successful. We basically saw that there were no side effects that we've seen with the other stuff. And there were basically also, you know, any sort of stuff with just normal stuff that you get, normal reactions and stuff like that after you've had any vaccine. It's just the immune system that will respond, clear it out. And then until the immune system sort of calms down over 1 or 2 days, that's normal. That's what's supposed to happen. You know, if you don't get an immune response, you're not alive. So you've got to get an immune response. So you're going to be, that's always going to happen after any vaccine. You know, it's going to be less severe, the reaction of the immune system, compared to the actual virus in that regard. But this is the difference between stuff that keeps on replicating and breaking up material and putting it all over the place and creating a lot of reactivity and other issues, which we won't go into because we're not allowed. But generally speaking, Novavax shows really good efficacy for mild and severe, and that's what we want to know. And, you know, obviously we know coronaviruses are infectious. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're immune. You can have COVID, then survive COVID. You can have the Novavax vaccine, then you know, get the same, you know, get immunity, and then 5 months down the track, you can still get COVID again. The difference is, if you've already been you're already immune to it due to Novavax or to actually surviving the initial infection, then it will be extremely mild to you may not even realize you've had it, because the immune system already is primed, knows what it is, go after it, clear it out, pretty much. But for the placebo group, it was quite obvious. You know, in terms of mild and severe, far more cases, and people that ended up with issues, health issues and all that, where you didn't see that. You saw none in the people that got vaccinated. So pretty much 100% efficacy for anything mild and severe, which is great, which means that we get good protection. And that means by having it, we'll be able to basically get a vaccine passport, which is being enforced on us, unfortunately. But some people, due to work or travel or whatever, are forced to go down that path. Not something that we like. You know, I'm peeved off about it. I don't believe that they should exist. I don't believe mandates should exist or anything like that. But unfortunately, we're living in a society where, unfortunately, more than somewhere around about 80% of the population is very compliant, supports these positions. And in a democracy, the 80% fools are basically getting their way and imposing laws and restrictions on the rest of us that don't really like it. All we can do is hope that these other people will wake up to themselves and realize they've been had. But until that happens, you know, we live in very strange times. Let's put it that way. So I hope you got something out of it, and at least people are aware now exactly that Novavax is pretty safe. We haven't seen any anaphylaxis, any sort of side effects of any severity. They're all no, zero, basically. Nothing with the heart, no inflammatory, no types, whether in the heart region or any other organ, no clotting factors. So looks pretty good. I thought it looked pretty good on paper, and with phase 3 trial, I think that's pretty much been confirmed. It's a traditional vaccine. And that is why it doesn't surprise me. Being a traditional vaccine, it's not doing strange things. It's just basically presenting part of the virus. Some other traditional vaccines, it's usually presenting the entire virus. In this case, it's just part of the virus and just saying to the immune system, here it is. I'm sensitizing this muscle area. Come and clear me out, and then basically learn how to respond when you actually see the real thing. That's the method of traditional vaccines. That's how they're supposed to work. And this is working exactly the way traditional vaccines are. And pretty much that is why it doesn't surprise me that all those issues are no, 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 no. That's exactly right. And that's the reason. And that's why I've been railing against the other stuff, because there were so many side effects in the oncology field. And we don't know what other adverse effects will be in the future. We've got no idea. No, there is no way of knowing. All we can do is extrapolate retrospectively, looking back at the oncology case studies, and that's all we've got. But prospectively forward looking, there are zero studies on these things. We're not looking at populations and saying, what are the outcomes in the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years of these people? We're getting some studies that are coming out at the moment, and they are showing a number of people with a number of poor outcomes of diverse things. But at the moment, there's not sufficient. You need to build a stronger picture of more evidence, so to speak, and that will come with time. But for a lot of people, it could be catastrophic. We've seen that in oncology up to 2 years. As I said, it's playing Russian roulette. There was no necessity to do that. We could have used traditional methods, and we wouldn't find ourselves in these difficult circumstances. A lot of us that were forced. There were many people that were forced due to circumstances, family circumstances, work-related circumstances, and many others if they were working frontline. It was like they had a bullet to their head, basically. And some people were able to basically give them the finger, others weren't, because they were in a very difficult spot. Mortgages, other family commitments and things like that. And that was unfair on those people. And I do feel for them, because I think that was disgraceful what was done to a lot of these people, and how they were treated, and how they were basically, disrespected for all their years of service. It's just completely and utterly, unacceptable that what has happened to this point. At least we've got an option. I just want it to basically appear quicker than it has. We've waited far too long. This was supposed to be available in September. Why has it taken so long? Phase 3 was actually finished in February, and the follow-up was completed in April. Why wasn't it made available earlier? Why is the TGA and the FDA still dragging their heels when dealing with Novavax? Why are these people basically looking after their mates in the other businesses? That's not their role. Their role is, if they're pushing their mates, Pfizer, Moderna, and all that through very quickly, emergency, well, why aren't they doing the same thing with Novavax? Hypocrites. That's all I can say. I'm not talking about conspiracies here. I don't believe in that sort of stuff. It's usually, as I've said before, largely these organisations being compromised, like with a lot of representatives from these organisations being in these bureaucracies, and tend to basically be very supportive of people that are associated with, or pay part of their, because remember, these, Pfizer and all these companies are very big, and they do contribute money into these organisations for research, which they control then. Yes, say no more. And so there is, let's say, too close a relationship and too much influence. And so maybe potentially, I'm not claiming anything about, you know, monopolistic sort of activities to support certain parties more than others. Someone could conclude that, you know, it is a speculation. It's an opinion. That is all it is, a speculation. I will let the rest of you make up your mind on that, whether you agree or disagree with me. That is up to you. I'm not claiming anything. I don't have any evidence. It just, yeah, stinks a bit. Let's put it that way. Anyway, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. See you.